Hey everyone, and welcome to Maybe Muslim. I'm Mariam Haider, producer and host of the podcast, and in this episode, I am in conversation with Nausheen Khan, an independent filmmaker based in India, whose documentary Land of My Dreams is a retracing of her journey as an Indian Muslim woman as she covered the Shaheen Bagh protest in 2019 and 2020. In this conversation, Nausheen shares her introspection around her identity growing up, the effect of stereotypes on her, and reclaiming her Muslimness in more ways than one. We discussed the myriad forms in which being a woman in the present times challenges us to show up with more clarity and confidence in every space we choose to be in. We also discussed the impact of friendships and the need for bonds that allow one to express the vulnerabilities one lives with, as a woman, an artist, a Muslim, among others. For Nausheen, living with joy is the biggest act of resilience, and this conversation is a snippet of that. Hey Nausheen, welcome to Maybe Muslim. It is such a pleasure to finally have you on the podcast, and I am really excited to see and have a conversation with you.
Hi, Mariam. It's great to be talking to you on the podcast after talking on the phone and discussing the podcast for such a long time. So I'm really excited to have this conversation with you.
We have been speaking to each other for more than a year now, you
Yeah.
know, and I almost feel like we've covered a world of conversations and topics and just a gamut of like so many experiences that I would love to just engage with you on this conversation today. And I think we can pick up from anywhere, but because this is a podcast and we want to have a more, I would say, linear conversation, I want to kind of go back to your early beginnings and really kind of ask you that, as an artist, as a filmmaker, as a Muslim woman, as an Indian, where do you find yourself in this space and time today?
Well, I find myself quite enraged as a woman, as a Muslim woman. Right now, in the space where I am, I live in Delhi, I live in Gurgaon. So um, I find myself quite enraged, and I think I've kind of reached an exhaustion with articulation, if that makes sense, in the sense that I can see that gender-based violence and just issues of patriarchy are manifesting in really violent forms all around me. But I also see like little signs of that violence in my interactions every day with the people that I know. And it's really difficult to draw a line where how much of patriarchal thinking is okay, or where does violence become so undeniable that now we have to do something about it, or can we do something about it from before? So, like I said, I've been finding myself quite exhausted with articulating this whole thing because for me, as a woman, as a Muslim woman, all these things are like really clearly in front of me. And when I talk to some of the men around me, it seems to be clear to them too. But we still have so much happening around us that's unbelievably violent and normalized, and it's really difficult to address things, especially now when we're noticing that everybody's tolerance is really, really decreased and decreasing continuously for having conversations that are difficult, for having dialogue that is a little bit complicated. So right now I am, as an artist, trying to articulate how to go beyond just, articulation, because it's not helping that I'm able to articulate women's issues in the most clear and simple and uh, understandable ways, because I still feel like there is a lot of stagnancy in the position still. Like the positions aren't drastically shifting, even with all this dialogue that has been going on. I mean, women have been writing and fighting and being visible and vocal, and even with all of the art and the music and the poetry and the films that we're making, it seems to have reached a point where actual positions aren't really shifting. So honestly, it's an interesting time for me to figure all these questions out, that if not dialogue, if not the conventional dialogue that we've been doing so far, what else? How else can one, talk about what's happening inside and outside? So I'm in that space. It's kind of, it's nice to have made one film already that has taught me a lot. And that was also a film about women's issues. It was also a film about myself as a Muslim woman, and a film about me essentially becoming a Muslim woman. So I've already kind of seen how people have responded, and what I need to do next is something that I'm preoccupied with right now. And it's a good place to be in, because there is a lot of anger and there is a lot of things, so I'm just trying to figure out how to go beyond these conventional ways of communicating that seem to be failing us at this moment.
You when you mention this, I am reminded of, it's like you're at a precipice of the next thing, having employed and having experienced the kind of um, work that you've engaged with. You've experienced it as a contributor, as a creative, and you've also now experienced it as someone who's received a response of your work.
Yeah,
And I feel like you've gathered a lot of, um, for lack of a better word, information
yeah,
of what, how does a work like yours, your film Land of My Dreams, impacts people that don't necessarily also fit in that conventional category of Indian Muslim women.
yeah, correct.
You've taken your films across the globe to different film festivals, different universities, different spaces. And you have mentioned this to me in the past, how you were surprised by the audience's response in places where you were expecting that to be the least.
Yeah.
Um, so before we move on to that part, I want to kind of maybe highlight the work you've done through Land of My Dreams. What was your experience making it, and how did you change after having made that film?
I think when I started making the film, I was also in an enraged mind space at the time, because my entry point into filming was when there was a massive police assault on university students, and it was a university that is my home. That's where I learned how to be myself, and that's where I learned how to tell stories and make friends, and find a sense of home. So making it was, well, another story. It was a completely self-financed film, and it took me 3 years to shoot and edit the film, and it was a really, really difficult journey. But thankfully, I had a lot of support. I had mentors and friends who supported me throughout that time, and I got through it. And I released the film, and then I got to travel. My first international screening was in Japan, and after that, I traveled, quote, quote unquote, westward, and I went to the UK, I went to Canada, and the response to my film in Japan was completely different from the response that it got in UK and Canada. And it was different in many ways, but putting it simply, I think, like, the people in Japan responded to it with so much emotion and empathy, and it was almost like they had had many similar life experiences where they were able to relate to me. But in the West, it was more, I still felt like people are kind of looking down on us, in that sense of, we know what is patriarchy, and we know what is feminism, and we know what is social movements and this and that, and now we are watching a film from that place of knowing. So it was a completely different type of observation in both these places, and I got to learn so much. I was in spaces that I hadn't really imagined myself earlier. Like, I went to Hot Dogs in Toronto, and it was such a fancy festival, and I felt really grateful to be there. But it was also like, I felt a little bit out of place. So all of the feelings that I got from these different places are what are left with me now. So, in terms of knowledge, I think overall I know what I don't want to do. I know what are the creative compromises that I don't want to make. And I also know that what I will be giving up if I choose not to conform in that way, like the kind of stories that Western audiences are looking for, etc. And I'm just kind of free of that pressure of, like, making films for a certain audience. Like, I know now that I'm so clear that I am just focused on expressing myself, and that is my job. My job is not to figure out who will like it and how to make it likable. So yeah, it was a very, very rich couple of years, knowledge wise, and many, many, you feel like you've collected all the different responses, and then there's one more and it's completely different from everything else. So it's wonderful. It's been really, really a great learning experience. Showing the film, all of the disappointments and, high moments, and, award winning and all these different things, and then not getting a selection. And so I've had to deal with like so many different feelings in context of this film. But now I'm trying to see myself as a new me that has appeared after, like, or like has developed after this whole experience, and what does that new me want to say, and how do I want to say. And I think the most important thing that I am taking from all these experiences is that before I figure out how to dialogue, I need to learn how to see, and I need to learn that again and again and again, because like I said, I'm quite tired of being, like figuring out my thoughts and then putting them clearly, and then, just figuring out what is the best way to express this emotion. I'm kind of tired of doing that, and I feel like it's not really moving the needle all that much for me. I need to express myself in a way that is probably deeper inside, so that it has like bigger ripples outside.
When I first watched your film a year and almost more than a year ago now, I remember taking notes during the viewing, and some of my notes were that I am so glad that Nausheen is raising this question, a question of self examination. Like, as you were engaging with the stories of the women at Shaheen Bagh, and you were asking these questions around the different women that you were interviewing all wanted to know more about, you were constantly in dialogue with yourself. And you were
Yeah,
constantly reminding the audience that I couldn't imagine, for example, my mother being there. And that
yeah,
hadn't occurred to me until actually you were witnessing and participating and engaging to that extent. And when as I was listening to you, I think, when you say this now, that you kind of want to go beyond that vocabulary, beyond that articulation, I think you started that already with your first film. And it's only through that you I feel you've arrived at this question of like, okay, what more, what next, what's the deeper question I'm trying to resolve.
mm,
Because to me that was very enlightening. I needed that witness which your film became for my internal experience.
right, yeah,
What does it mean to really have all these questions around the stagnation of an identity and the stagnation of this experience of, okay, so we have all these lived realities of being a woman born in a highly patriarchal society, a woman that's also born in a minority community, a woman that's now at the precipice of figuring her own self, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but you're doing all of that, and it's disorienting as well. I mean, it obviously is, but you are letting that be rather than trying to arrive at an answer, because I don't think so one can do it at the same time. You can't be like challenging yourself with these questions that are coming up and just try to arrive at the answer and be like, okay, ho gaya, you know.
Hmm.
So that to me was why your film was so powerful, that you weren't just holding these questions and being like, and then finally we arrived.
Yeah. And then this happened.
Yeah, and then and you leave the audience with those questions, which, because they are hard questions, because they are not kind of found in a certain scholarly work. You can't like pick up a book and be like, okay, and this is how women experience this,
Exactly.
or this is what Shaheen Bagh means to me as a Muslim Indian woman. Like, the
Hmm.
answers are varied, the experiences are varied. So one film that you've made obviously opens up a lot of such questions. And I want to particularly ask you about your experience of interacting with the audiences, specifically the women in Japan.
Yeah.
Um, and I'd love to hear how like what was that experience like?
I mean, it was beautiful. So, because it was my first international screening of this film, and I'd only shown it in Kerala before that, even in India, I hadn't screened it much. I was really nervous before the first screening. I remember just having like so much anxiety and calling my friends and my mentor, and I didn't have internet, and I was speaking out, and I just then I did some like breathing exercises, because in my mind it was like, how the hell will they understand the context of this film, which is about a particular social people's movement in India, and all of the questions that I'm asking are so complicated and nuanced, and there are more contradictions than questions. Like, if this is like this, then how come I'm feeling like this? And stuff like that. So I was really unsure, because it's also a little bit, I mean, at that time I was thinking it's a fast-paced film. It's half the time people are talking in Hindi, there's subtitles, how will they read it quickly and how will they make sense of it? And at the end of the screening, there was a Q&A which was supposed to go on for 20 minutes, and I obviously was speaking out about that also. But when people started asking me the questions and responding to the film with so much emotion and so much love, and there's so many stories to share about their own experiences. And they said that, things that I said in the film reminded them of their childhood or their experience with, about losing friends, for example. And that was the Q&A actually went on for 20 minutes, and then we had to vacate the hall where we were viewing the film. And then we moved outside, and there was a translator, because lots of people were asking questions in Japanese. And then we stood outside for almost 2 hours, and people queued up. And there was men, women, everyone, but people had lined up, and they really wanted to, more than asking me questions, they wanted to tell me about their experiences and their relationship with their friends and their mothers, and the family structure in Japan, and how it kind of is also reflected in the government structures and things like that. And it was just beautiful. I mean, we were talking to each other for 2 hours, till they definitely were like, you have to leave now, you can't just stand over here. And then I was in at the festival was around 10 days, 7 to 10 days, and there were two screenings. And then I would just, and this is in Yamagata, so it's a small um, mountain town in North Japan. And all of the events of the festival were like walking distance from each other. And then I would just be walking, and so many women would like see me from a restaurant and come out and talk to me and tell me about their friends, or they came for the second screening and brought their friend with them. And it was intensely emotional, and I met so many people, so many women there, from Hong Kong, from China, from South Korea, and all of them seemed to be, I mean, there was this one particular instance where this girl who I'm now friends with, she was speaking to me, and how we were talking was on that translation app. So she came and sat next to me, and we were like smiling, and like first she was saying things that I knew she was saying, that, oh, I loved your film, etc., or whatever. She was giving me hugs, and she was really emotional, and she was kind of about to tear up. And then she wrote something in the translation app, and she showed it to me, and it translated to free, because I had used the word azadi in my film. And then she showed it to me, and I looked up to her, and both of us just started crying, and we just hugged and we cried. And then we chatted like through the night. And such a small word can mean so much, which goes beyond language. I think Japan gave me that sense for the first time, like, what they call the power of storytelling, and it kind of moves across, doesn't need language, it doesn't need to be contextualized, and all of those things. So I realized that actually when I was in Japan, only because of the way that people opened up the vulnerable parts of them to me after watching me do that in the film. So it really, really was really, really one of the best experiences of my life. I remember when I was on the plane back, I just made, like, I journaled everything, like every single detail that I could remember, because it was just super precious. And it was just unmatched. Like, I went all over the world after that, but I still feel like Japan was the best viewing of my film, and the best audience interaction that I've ever experienced, like in the last 2 years, with so many different screenings all over the world.
I mean, that is just a magical experience to even listen to. So I can only imagine how it must have been for you. And it's so heartening to hear that you kind of made friends who, despite not belonging to that same socio-economic background,
Or cultural background also is so
cultural
different.
background, uh,
Yeah,
it's they connected because it's human condition. Like you
yeah,
used the word vulnerability, like you're talking about some very clearly universal aspects of being a human, of being a woman in this world, of being questioned for choosing freedom, and always having to negotiate every choice based on freedom. Like you kind of, I think most of us make choices just wanting to make sure that we are more and more free. And
yeah,
it's a constant negotiation. And so
yeah.
I think when you say that, when your friend,
Negotiation is like, putting it super lightly, it's more like a battle. Like, it's
it's
just
a,
like
I mean, it's a battle. It's like it's top of your mind. Like I think
all the
by
time.
negotiation, I what I am trying to says that it's like every waking moment of
Yeah,
your life,
absolutely.
you're kind of
No, you're right.
negotiating like, abhi kya, like, will this lead me to
Yeah,
get more freedom, or am I putting myself in some kind of a restricted space?
yeah,
Whether it's a physical space, whether it's an emotional space, whether it's a social space, like it's
yeah. And you might really want that to be in that social space, or you
yeah,
really might want to be in that emotional space, or relationship, or job, or whatever it is.
yeah.
You might really want to be there, but it might not be the way to feel freer. So then you're like, what the hell should I do? And you're
I
making these choices every day.
I mean, I don't necessarily enjoy quoting white women for these kinds of conversations. But there was a quote circulating by this actor Kirsten Stewart, I believe, where she
Hmm,
she recently said that being a woman is a really violent experience.
it is.
And
Totally felt
I'm
her on
like,
that.
that's like that should be like
I
just
think because she's a white woman, she was able to say it like that, because we would still like soften it a lot.
but I mean, that's the point. Like being a woman is such a violent experience, and obviously I think that is also a sort of blanket way of putting it. But what is a woman? There are so many marginalizations, and there are so many layers to that, that
Yeah,
every experience is also different, and there are, just that's why I'm particularly not, I don't necessarily like carrying those sort of banner
labels.
like labels of identity in that sense.
Yeah.
um but coming back to friendships, and again, this is something, Nosheen, you and I have been kind of discussing offline as well, of like how much do friendships matter, and how valuable they are, specifically as we learn how to just be our most authentic selves in every way.
Yeah.
And we are talking about centering friendships that are mutually nourishing
Supportive. Yeah.
and supportive, and kind of help us just, I would say, on most days breathe better.
Yeah.
And you've talked about that in your film as well, of what happened as you kind of learn, I mean, as you just started grappling with this identity of yours, with the Muslim identity of yours, and kind of your your entire learning curve, I would say, where you're growing up in a secularized space.
Yeah.
You are getting educated in private English medium schools. You are excited about the possibility of what it means to be this Indian urban woman making
Yeah.
choices. And then you realize that even your closest friends are not necessarily seeing you for the way your Muslimness and your identity as a Muslim woman is getting attacked and questioned and interrogated, and which has
Yeah.
also which has always been happening. I think you also mentioned, you kind of mentioned this in your film, like you were always realizing it, but then downplaying it until you realize that there's no downplaying this Muslim identity anymore. You can't just ignore the fact that this influences every relationship of your life. And I want
Hmm.
to kind of sit with that question with you, like how have friendships evolved over a period of time for you, and what do you seek in friendships now? What friendships nourish you? And yeah.
I can talk about how these questions around friendship have changed me instead of talking about how the friendships have changed, because I think that I will be able to tell you better what's going on with me because your thoughts about it are changing all the time. What friendship should be and should do and should not do, and all those things are constantly changing. Um, I feel like because I'm an Indian Muslim woman and I'm faced with discrimination and Islamophobia and things that are said that affect me, I have to do a lot of internal work to process those things and to learn how to respond and how to think about them and how to talk about them to myself and to others. I'm doing all this internal work, but my friends don't necessarily have to do that work because they are not at the receiving end of that discrimination. And it's the same with men and women and patriarchy. That yeah, they might, like, the men around me might think that, ladkiyon ko, women should be equal and this is fair and this is not. But actually, they are not at the receiving end of, when my brain receives a sentence, only I can tell that this is unfair as a woman. But a man may not even see it. So it's the same with being a Muslim woman. Like I've noticed that so many things are said in social situations or just the way that, we express ourselves that may be Islamophobic, but my friends who are not Muslim, they don't even register it. So they don't even think that there's anything to address or process or that they need to check on me or any of those things. And it's frustrating to constantly be like, hey, I really didn't like it when you didn't support me that day or whatever. I have done that. I have been doing that with a lot of friends where I felt that I can't go on in this friendship unless I address this thing. Then I have done that, this happened and I felt really bad and you didn't seem to even notice it. And I'm telling you, or I told you that this is why it affects me. But it's insanely exhausting. It's insanely exhausting to keep on doing that work. And sometimes you want to, sometimes you don't want to. And sometimes it's just easier to be like, you know what, you and I are not getting along and I don't need your energy in my life. So bye bye. It's easier, but you can't just keep on taking the easy way out, and not with everyone. Like, these, you have to sometimes let things go. You have to pick your battles. You have to like, you have to decide which hill you want to die on. So uh, I do feel that I have learned to rely on different friends for different needs and compartmentalize that stuff a little bit to make life easier for myself and for the friendship as well. But I do feel that if I'm taking something to a friend and they're absolutely dismissing it, then I have to also just accept that they're not willing to engage and they're not willing to see my side of the story. And I don't necessarily want that in a friend, because all I'm looking for, basically, like the most important thing I'm looking for in friendships is absolute non-judgment. Like if there's any judgment at all, I don't know if I can call that friendship, or if I would like to, invest in that friendship. Or And since I was very little, I have relied on people more than I have relied on systems and establishments and things like that, and even more so now. I've always been relying on my friends and spaces where my friends are to be more authentically myself, and had so many, ups and downs and heartbreaks and all these things in friendship. And especially with my film coming out, a lot of my close friends didn't really, engage with it or even watch it, or, you know, they weren't really present for me, or they kind of just left my life slowly after I made my film. And it has been a really difficult time, just not taking it personally, and not experiencing that kind of a thing as a rejection of me, or as a something that makes me feel like I'm not good enough. That's why they're not friends with me anymore. And it's taken a lot of work, and I'm constantly working on it. But I do feel that in general, we need to start having conversations like these about, like, what can we do better as friends? Because political and cultural and social life is getting more and more difficult all over the world. Minorities are kind of being oppressed in such a manner that is super silent. Like, so, and the capitalistic culture is pushing us into this isolation where one person's problems is really just their problem, nobody else's. And especially with women's issues, like, I'm having such a hard time making people understand, or even articulating myself, that how do I make visible that all of women's issues are connected in cities, in villages, all over the world. It is about control. It is about a system that came into place. Patriarchy is a system that came into place around the same time that war came into place in this world. Those two are so deeply connected, and that is why, in the slightest moment of difficulty or conflict, the first thing we do is shut down the women's voice. And that is nothing new, and that is nothing different from the other. It is just varying contexts and varying social situations and political and cultural terrains, but essentially it is really, really primitive. And I'm having a really hard time, expressing this simple thing. I mean, there was a news yesterday in my own city in Gurgaon, not very far from where I am right now. A 25-year-old woman who was a state level tennis player was shot and killed inside her house in Gurgaon by her father. And I saw this news yesterday and it absolutely broke my mind. And I was reading the news and I was thinking of all these things, that, the reasons are different, but it's all about lack of control. It's all about protecting tradition. It's all about the same, we just short circuit to forcing women to be silent and forcing them into invisibility. So I don't know how to say that this man shooting his daughter is very, very similar to, like, some professor in college telling a student what to wear, because it's essentially coming from the
But
same,
yeah, control.
yeah, it's essentially coming from so where do we draw the line of how much are we going to listen to, and how much is okay, or like what is patriarchal and what is not. And I essentially truly I believe everything is patriarchal, and we are all just inside this system. And even women's freedom is always inside a daira.
Mm,
It's never really free. There's always a price. You always have to exchange something to
yeah,
get certain degree of freedom.
yeah, yeah. When I read I basically saw your post about it this morning, and honestly, that was the reason why I even asked you if you were good for the recording, because it had shaken me as well. And I think the question I'm grappling with, when it comes to this, the kind of violence that is committed against is being committed against women, marginalized folks across the world, um, is that dehumanized how much of dehumanization have we internalized that violence doesn't shake us anymore, that we are not shaken, like it's I don't know, it stumps me, like I kind of freeze with
Yeah,
that.
like half the people are not not being shaken by the violence, and half the people are being so shaken that they're getting violent. So it's, an absence and a presence of extreme responses, and it's quite difficult to be just cool and chill and meet friends and go out, and like it's just very difficult to remain like normal and sane and not angry.
Yeah, I was reading about this term called hypernormalization, I think, which was coined at the time, I think around the Soviet Union, I think the breakdown of the USSR.
Mm,
But largely, like, the term hypernormalization indicates that when systems were crumbling around them and people were still like kind of functional, and I use quotes here, like functional in their day to day
mm,
life. And when I read that piece, I was like, yeah, yeah, this is the word that needs to be like in my mind centered, because I'm like, this is absolutely wild to me, that if I'm speaking to a friend of mine who comes either from a main majoritarian background, or being like a white background or European,
mm.
whatever, I'm just like, how, how are we functional? How are we having just like, and I'm participating in them as well. So this kind of staggers me too, that
Yeah,
because I get very drained after a small conversation where it's just like chit chat.
yeah,
And even though a deeper or a more heavier conversation will also be challenging, but at least it will allow me to feel heard, it will allow me to
yeah.
feel like somebody responded, and I'm not going like, I don't think so, this is
I'm not the
wrong.
only one who thinks like this.
Yeah, but when there is that chit chat element, I'm not sure if it helps, or does it just make me feel like I feel very disoriented.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, when I went, so this was my first time in the West when I took my film to the UK and to Canada, and watching the women over there just be, and the way that they spoke, and the way that they walked, and the way that they interjected in conversations, I realized the weight of that patriarchy that I've like internalized, and the colonization as well, and how I have I mean, I don't want to use the word hyper normalization loosely now, but how I have internalized this, all these different constraints which I didn't even know are like constructed or a product of a historical political setting. Like, it's not
Yeah,
in
the moment in time.
vacuum.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
when I realized that it is so different. I mean, I really have to make sure that everybody is laughing before I laugh out loud, you know, sometimes in the West when I'm sitting and talking, because I really don't know what's going on. I'm constantly doubting myself. Even though I've made the film, I know what I've experienced. It's my story. I should be able to be completely confident, but I'm just second guessing, and I'm just doubting myself all the time. That's just like habit for me. And even to unlearn all those things is like a lot of work that I have to do again on myself.
But like you said, right, like, in the beginning of our conversation that you have been, experience of screening your film in eastern, so-called like east versus the west, has been a learning, has been of like decentering
Yeah.
the western notions and the western audience. And
Yeah.
I think that is a very pivotal, monumental shift in the way we make any kind of work, any kind of creative pursuit. Not just because our idea of audience changes, but because our idea of creating that piece changes. Like if I
Yeah.
am producing an episode, I am I would be glad if somebody who is not from, like, who is not connected to this part of the world and not connected to the conversations we are talking about would lean in and be curious and ask me that I want to know more. I would always invite
Yeah.
that. Um,
Hmm.
but I am particularly more interested in seeing how this conversation resonates with people who largely understand this context and have
Hmm.
lived that experience to a certain
Yeah.
extent, because that's where I hope there is a possibility of more ideas to come from. Like you said earlier, like what is the next thing that you want to do, how are you
Hmm.
building on that? I really think that comes from a, this seeking out of spaces where one way or the other we connect,
Yeah.
you know um, and I learn that from I'm learning that from our conversation right now, that in that decentering
Hmm.
there is a lot of more space opening for centering all those conversations, all those experiences, which eventually will lead to better imagination.
Yeah, and I think it's like really simple steps that I learned myself. Like, when you're listening to somebody talking, just listen instead of preparing your response or preparing your rebuttal, or finding the keywords and making mental notes about like what you're going to respond and how you have a different opinion and your experience has been this certain way. So how could it be true that your experience is, etc. So I learned that like while I was touring, and I found myself, preparing these little rebuttals in my head as people spoke. And then over time, I realized that I don't need to do that. And I'm able to be so much more present when I'm just listening without feeling the need to respond immediately or come up with something smart to say, or come up with an opinion of my own, which is so different from the other opinion, all of those things. So I feel like all of these big, larger, complex things that we're talking about, it really boils down to small, small things. And I feel great joy in identifying these little steps that I can take.
Glimmers.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
like, changing something within to then experience a change outside, hopefully, but also like just changing something within to begin with.
Yeah. I think what you said about listening, I mean, it's applicable. It could be applicable in every relationship that you have, in every
Yeah,
space, and you can just turn the quality of that conversation immediately.
absolutely.
It allows this, the moment the space is there and you become a good listener. It just, the other person just feels like that's vulnerability too. Actually,
It
that
is.
I'm just here to listen. Tell me more.
Yeah, it's not about me.
Yeah,
It's about
it's
whatever
and
this person is saying.
exactly. And I think with your film, again, I'm going back to like my experience of watching it and kind of sitting with that, is that for I think I would say this for the first time, because it was also a visual experience for me, like
Hmm.
watching it and then listening as you were giving that background, that you were creating that space, that okay, I'm listening to all these women, but I'm also listening to myself, and now I'm sitting with this. Okay, there's so much happening.
Yeah,
The Shaheen Bagh movement has shifted so many things that were already inside me.
yeah,
And when I was watching it, I was like, thank you. Like, I think a part of my brain was just going like, I am so glad that now she is asking these questions. I'm so glad. Like, I think there were these exclamation points
yeah.
in my
I
notes.
think that's what you even said to me when we met like briefly
Yeah,
after. You were
yeah.
like something nice about the questions.
um, I think also because I up until that point, um, I think when I have had conversations with people about the identity and like being a Muslim and being a woman from this part of the world, and from having had those lived experiences of constantly questioning that, okay, how do I fit in? How do I fit in? Kind of
Yeah,
um that no, I mean, I say this with curiosity again. I don't Nobody was asking me these questions as well. Somebody was explaining this identity to me, like whether it was history or whether it was family or whether it was culture or media or cinema. Like somebody or the else was asking this question for me, where I'm like, acha, but can I please ask? Can I at
yeah,
least open up to this
yeah, yeah, yeah,
before you already, like you said, look down and be like, oh, I know how to resolve this for you.
yeah, yeah. You should do this.
Yeah, you should do this. Have you thought about this? Have you
Yeah.
read this person's work?
And
Have you?
that was a lot of have you thought about this is a lot of, like, a lot of questions started this way for me when I was showing it in a lot of universities. And I felt like, in that moment, of course, I was intimidated and I responded in whatever way that I knew how to respond. But when I thought about it later, I was just like, at the end of the day, everyone in these spaces is constantly trying to sound smart. And I'm putting it in a little bit of a simplistic way, but I just felt like I'm also doing that, they are also doing that, and then we're like playing these really, playing these parts of like how everyone is smart and critical and this
And
and that,
cool.
cool, and
Yeah.
all the new ways of dissenting and things like that, and all these words and phrases are being like copy pasted from some other article which we've read, and we've not even read the article, we've just read the Instagram two lines caption or whatever, and we've made up this whole argument based on something that we saw and we read and things like that. And even I was doing that. I was also kind of dragged into that terrain of having to, come up with a response that is witty and smart and it's a new perspective and all of those things. So I feel like because so much is happening in my life and around my environment, in the environment around me, that I'm constantly coming from this place of having to prove something, and that is also exhausting, and I'm slowly kind of training myself to unlearn that. Because if when I was a child someone had told me that you don't need to prove anything to anyone, I think my whole life would have been different, because I was always made to believe that I have to prove that I'm good, better, best. I'm good at sport. I'm good at school. Even though I do sport, I can also do good grades, or like, I can do this, I have to do this or whatever. And like, I have to be a good student, a good daughter, a good sister, a good this and a good that. But I feel like now my brain is in that zone all the time where I'm like trying to prove that what I'm saying is right and it's accurate, and so I wonder what it would be like to listen and to respond and be in conversations without feeling that need to prove that I'm good and I'm good enough.
Yeah. Um, I relate to that. And I think, like you said earlier, there's this entire capitalistic framework also that plays its part there, where this climbing the ladder of quote unquote success and proving your worth is the hamster wheel.
Yeah, and it's also the family values, right? Like for us as Muslim people or a Muslim family that has migrated to a city from the village after being in the village forever, and then you go into the city. So the thing that we were always told that, you have to make your life yourself. If you do good, then your life will be good. Otherwise, we won't be able to do much. Your life is in your hands. You have to do good in studies. You have to get a good job. You have to make money. You have to get married. You have to follow these steps, and you have to do really well if you want to get out of this tag of Muslim family, Muslim women, how Muslim children are seen. Even as my brother and I were like always the only Muslims in our classrooms or in our, in the school bus or wherever we were, where there were like, other people our age. So it was constantly like you're fighting this otherness or this othering by proving that you're actually as good as the others in studies and sports and extracurriculum and things like that. So that pressure was added. Matlab, there was a double pressure on people like my brother and me, or people like you and me, or whatever it is. You know, it's not enough to just get enrolled in the school and then just learn and have fun. It was, you really had to be like top of your class, and you really, really had to prove all the time that you're normal. And despite being a Muslim, you can, be in a dance club or be in a music club or whatever it is. So it was always like this double pressure, and now I'm slowly trying to unlearn that pressure, even as that pressure is still there. Like, people still say some really weird things. Like, when this Pahalgam attack happened, my brother happened to be in Pahalgam, and it was a really scary time. I mean, he was on a holiday. He was, I think, gone for a friend's wedding to Srinagar, and then I suggested to him that he should go to Pahalgam because it's really my favorite place on this planet. And I organized this trip for him. And on the first day of his trip, this happened, and it was hell. It was really, really stressful. And when I was telling a couple of my friends about it, one of them actually said to me, so I said, oh, my brother was in Pahalgam when this happened. It was insanely stressful. And a couple of my friends said to me that, yeah, but nothing would have happened to him because he's a Muslim. They wouldn't have killed him. And I was like, even I didn't think of that. I was like, I said, yeah, okay, I guess so. Yeah, I guess you're right. I mean, I really don't know where to go from something like that when you're just having a casual conversation and somebody just says something super outlandish and Islamophobic. But in the current context, in the narrative that they are living in, it makes sense. And then if you were to argue with that, you're basically arguing with their entire life and belief system and foundation on which their social life and their, financial world is built on. And then it's just not worth it. Like, I'm not going to sit here and explain to you that I'm no less an Indian than you, and it is scary for anybody. I mean, I don't know. Like, I did once or twice explain to them why, it's not like if I will see somebody with a gun, I'll immediately give them a high five just because I'm a Muslim, So I don't know how to explain this to people, and I don't even know if I should or should not. And then whether I explain it to them or not, they've just said it and moved on with their life. But I am wounded. Seriously, it takes me months to process stuff like this, and to be able to laugh and talk about it right now on this podcast, that means I've talked about it hundreds of times. I've cried about it, I've been mad about it, I've been sad about it, and now I'm in this place where I can be like, haha, some of my friends said this Islamophobic thing. So for them, they must have forgotten also. They said it, and it doesn't affect their life at all, and they've moved on and they're doing other things. But I'm here sitting up and talking about this and thinking about this and writing about this and all of those things. So
Yeah, there's a like the kind of emotional labor that goes into processing that and
yeah.
coming back to your sense of self and being realizing that that person in that moment made it made it so unsafe for you to be in that conversation with them.
Yeah, and
I
they're my
think
friends. So now do I continue to be their friend and
that-
just act like this never happened?
I think that is something I've grappled with as well. It's like, does the other person, if they say something Islamophobic, and for whatever, give them the benefit of doubt unconsciously, quote unquote,
Yeah.
they make that conversation, that space, highly unsafe for me. And I don't think so. They understand what that lack of safety does to me. And I think when I'm listening to you as you share of your experience, I can only, I think, imagine that kind of work it takes to come out of that and be like, I need to breathe. I need to kind of ground myself. I need to.
And when they've said this, it's like the middle of the day. We're still gonna spend the rest of the day together, like eating and drinking and going out and,
Right.
doing normal things. So the entire time, the rest of the time, I'm just like sitting with this heavy thing in my head and having to act like haha, hee hee, and all that. So
Yeah,
it's
it's
really,
again,
really crazy.
it's all like this is the disorientation, right? How do you not get it?
Yeah,
This is what is the problem, I think, when it comes to, I'm going back to communications and kind of also empathy, that I don't know if people really understand the work it takes to be empathetic. And it's
no,
not for the other person. Like, it's not about, oh, you are doing a favor to them by being empathetic. You're
yeah,
actually doing your inner work, and you're actually
being a
becoming
human
a more
being.
conscious human being,
Yeah,
a more safer human being, a more present human being, by being empathetic, by actually being like, oh shit, I don't know why I just said it, and I'm so sorry.
mm,
I Are you all right? And please tell me, or actually not please tell me, but just like, something was off, and this is my work to now sit with and be uncomfortable, because it's not your job
yeah,
to
yeah,
make it comfortable for them, I think.
yeah. But
I
we've been doing that. I think I have been
Exactly.
doing that all my
Exactly.
life.
We've been doing that for, I think, forever. That the
Yeah,
moment somebody says something Islamophobic or uncomfortable, we're like, I get it. It's fine. It's like,
mm,
where, like, I mean, I'm not taking all the responsibility for it, but I do understand how unconsciously we've been doing that growing up, for the
yeah,
reason of, like, for a variety of factors that played into it. And
mm,
it's all like it's not one isolated reason, but the weight of it is a lot. Why have I made it my job to let you carry your biases and stereotypes, and
yeah,
become the outlier, and be like, oh yeah, like, not your family, like, not you, not
yeah.
about you. And I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah, yeah. So we have very limited choices. I feel like that's the whole thing about marginalization of any kind, that your choices shrink. From big things like the choice of houses that I get when I'm looking for places to rent out, to like what I can wear, what I can say, the kind of spaces that are safe for me, and all of those things, the choices that I have are so limited because I am a Muslim woman. And these are really small and unsaid and really, really tiny things, but they add up, and it's really frustrating to keep on engaging in this internal dialogue all the time, because you can see that the people around you are not having to do that. But like you said, the responsibility of keeping things pleasant and all that also falls on our shoulders. Where even if something was said and I said something back, and there has been like an uncomfortable moment, I feel like it's my responsibility to then, like, crack a joke after some point, or like, make the
Yeah,
situation a little bit like
yeah,
bearable and pleasant and be like, oh, haha, whatever. So it's a lot of internal work, and that's what I'm trying to figure out. Like what you said about empathy also, like instead of just looking for it and criticizing people and all of that, I'm trying to look inwards to find these little hacks on how I can be in a more peaceful space. And I think what this year I have been trying to do, which my mentor kind of told me to do, was to like preserve myself for myself, which I really hadn't, even as a concept, I didn't even know till I think earlier this year that, it's my body, it's my mind, it's my energy, and it's my time, and I need to be careful with how I'm spending it and where I'm spending my energy and what I'm spending time even thinking about. So I have become careful about who to hang out with, and it's really sad because I am usually a person who has like many, many friends, and I do have friends all over the world, school friends, college friends who moved away, and friends I've met, in different times of my life and different jobs and things like that. And I've really had to be. It's not come easy. Even this preserving thing has been really hard because my instinct is, someone calls me and they're like, I need help. I'm like, okay, fine, I'll just drop everything and go to their house. And then, sometimes it's not reciprocated, or sometimes this person has some, the way that they treat women, or just some thing is happening which is making me uncomfortable, but they're my friend and they need me, so should I go or should I not go? So this year I've been trying to just preserve myself and even my thoughts. I'm conscious about how much time I'm spending in thinking about things, and I'm trying to think about things that I want to think about, not just thoughts that are coming to me and kind of pushing me into spaces of like darkness and spirals and fatigue. So I'm being conscious about, like, recently, it's been a month that I've deleted the Instagram app off my phone because I got so addicted to scrolling for that little dopamine and whatever comfort that scrolling does to your brain, because it really, I realize that it's taking up a lot of my, like, just the hard disk, like, is full, and it's not allowing me to make any space for new ideas. I've started feeling stuck in situations where I'm like, no, these are the only two ways, these are the only two, solutions to this problem, and there's no other way, and I'm stuck. And now the third way, and the fourth way, and the fifth way has started showing itself to me because I'm trying to make space in my brain by preserving the space that I have, and preserving myself and my time as well. And it's very hard. It is very hard because all of these things like guilt have been, like, we've been trained by guilt tripping. Like, literally, society has trained us that if you do this, you can take that choice, but you're going to be really guilty afterwards for many, many years. So, do you want to be a free woman? No. So, it's really, really difficult to deal with guilt, and I'm trying to even, you know, spend less time on thinking about all of these things and more time on, even if I have to sit with an empty head, I'm okay to do that instead of thinking about something that's only bringing me down, and spending time in figuring out people who I want to keep in my life, but they are causing me pain, and they're causing me a lot of overthinking and a lot of self-doubt and self-pity. So yeah, I think that's what I feel I can do right now. But definitely I think that we need to build spaces that are safe. We need to be able to express ourselves without resentment, and all of this stuff takes a lot of effort, conscious effort and intent and time and practice.
Yeah. We need to be able to be ourselves without guilt,
Yeah,
without, with the
which is
imperfections.
very hard. It sounds like a sentence, but it's really
Yeah,
hard.
yeah, it's an absolutely, an amazing headline, but it's a hell of a job to practice. Um, but I do feel this, and I want to emphasize on that it's the small things that add up. So when I'm listening to you, like, I feel encouraged because in my small attempts at feeling less guilty, or like being okay with the imperfections, or the confusions, or like the not knowings, that
Hmm.
I don't know better,
Yeah.
um, allows me to then maybe at least open space to know how to do better.
Yeah. Correct.
Like, I think with friendships and with like those relationships where in the past you've just held space and been like, okay, this is who you are, and I'm just gonna like let you be. I'm like, okay, and this is who I am, and let's be uncomfortable about it. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know what to do next, I don't know how to
Yeah.
move here from here, but at least I'm gonna let this discomfort hang around.
Yeah.
um and I think that's on most days. If we can even do that, I think that just allows more, like you said, like to get to the third option and the fourth option and be like, okay,
Yeah.
there's more room, there's more possibility. um
Hmm.
and I think that truly is liberating. I think that
Yeah.
truly
In a way, it's like a painful rebirth. It's like you have to
is
go up in ashes, literally,
like, yeah,
first.
yeah, yeah,
Third degree burns.
I empathize with that. um Last question, Nosheen. What are you building, imagining next?
You mean, what am I imagining building next?
Yes. Yes.
I am still, like, so I'm working on a concept which is about women and joy, because I was thinking a lot about how it is really difficult to feel joy without feeling guilt or without being in a hurry or whatever it is, or So just been thinking about this a lot and writing, and I'm not sure if it will be a film or what it will be, and I'm not putting too much pressure on the form. I'm open to all possibilities. Maybe it will be a short, I don't know, like graphic novel. It can be anything. I'm basically open to the different ways in which it can finally come out. I'm not very worried about that right now. Right now, I am just in the process of writing and talking to a lot of people about it, and just talking to different friends about how do they experience joy and what are their experiences of being joyful in their childhood and now. And it's a little bit a lot of my own experiences growing up are connected to this particular theme, and a lot of those are actually very painful things. So I want to kind of remember that pain and kind of inquire into it and really try to understand that why is it so painful for me to think and write about joy and talk about joy. And yeah, that's what I'm doing right now. And I'm also, I'm reading quite a bit. I'm trying to read different things, watch different things. I think for a long time I didn't really feel like watching a lot of films, but now I do feel like watching. So I'm going to make the best of this mind space that I'm in and watch as many things. And because I don't have Instagram now, so I'm actually on YouTube a lot, and it's so much better. It's amazing. I'm listening to lectures and I'm watching fun stuff. It's really good. So I feel like I'm in a nice creative there are a lot of different high energies in this space that I'm in, where I have a lot of stimulus that I'm want to respond to, but at the same time I'm doing all these different simultaneous activities where I'm trying to learn to let go of the guilt. I'm trying to learn to be more free in my own mind and my own body. And this whole patriarchy thing is always there and always connected to everything. So, constantly grappling with that. But yeah, I feel like I'm finally seeing that there is some light at the end of this tunnel, and I'm just trying to follow it right now without worrying about the outcome too much.
That's beautiful. Um, and I mean, over the course of our conversation, I can sense that the way you are, and don't want to call it working, but the way you are being, in in your in this conversation, in your spaces that you are choosing to be part of, you are expanding. You kind of taking more room, taking more space,
Yeah,
and just being like, yep, I will take my own sweet time in just taking as much space as
yeah,
I want to. And I think that is incredible. And I do again want to reiterate that your film does that in so many ways. It opens room, it opens spaces for conversation, it helps you sit with the discomfort and also with the possibility of you don't always get all the answers at the same time, but that doesn't mean you stop asking questions.
right. No, thank you so much. You're too kind. I mean, you've praised my film so much that now this podcast is like sounding like I've paid you some money to endorse it in some
Oh,
way, but
why did you
I
say this
know that
already? Why did you say this? We had to keep it under wrap. I will have.
because I don't know, because we haven't discussed any amount, and I'm scared now of how expensive this is going to be. So I don't want to bring it up.
Well,
But
I can take this conversation offline. I can quote you a plan.
not at all. It's been a pleasure. It's really been awesome and great that we have been able to kind of, be such cool, really intelligent ladies on this podcast. And I'm really happy with
Absolutely,
this
absolutely.
conversation.
Yeah. Thank you, Nausheen. And I am excited every day to just see the person you're becoming, get to be a get to be your friend on this journey, and obviously excited for all the things you're going to do.
Same to same, right back at you.
Thank you.
Love to be your friend. Thank you so much for listening.
If you enjoyed listening to this episode, please review and or give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to them. You can stay up to date with Nausheen's documentary screenings through her Instagram handle, and her IG handle is Nausheen Khan Films. Thank you for listening to Memphi Muslim. I'm Mariam Heather, and we'll be back with another episode in a few weeks' time. Until then, take care, lots of love and gratitude.